by Stellantis' decision, especially this close to Christmas. This follows the closure of the Skef plant in Luton North after a century of manufacturing earlier this year. Like them, Vauxhall is, or was, synonymous with Luton. Stellantis' callous decision will impact our whole town, our whole region even. So what support will be offered to not just the skilled and dedicated Vauxhall workers who are losing their jobs, but also to our whole town as a whole to cope with the loss of this manufacturing giant which Luton helped build?
Tuesday.
Grateful to my honourable friend for her question as well, and echo the sentiments I gave to her constituency neighbour in my earlier question. The timing of this, I think, the whole decision is regrettable, but the timing is particularly regrettable around it. As I said in my statement, we have done everything we can since the new government came into power on the 5th of July to try to avoid this. I reiterated the offers I have made throughout the negotiating process in terms of both policy flexibility and indeed the potential of new government investment in the site, but regrettably it was not possible to change this decision. The support that I have made clear is available. I reiterate that promise, and I do say, despite in fact I would not want to minimise the impact of this in any way. I believe her area is a place of considerable economic strength, firms in engineering and aerospace, in air travel, in the creative industries. There's a lot to be optimistic about for the future, but that doesn't take away the bitterness of this particular blow for Luton at this time. I recognise that.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I make clear that we on this side regard this as a very grave matter? We are taking this seriously, and we are also dealing in facts. Yep. Turning then to veracity, can we hear whether or not Stellantis raised the question of the eye-watering ZEV mandate fines? Did they ask for them to be lifted?
I'm grateful to him for his question. Yes, in the conversations we had with them, they raised every aspect of the previous government's policy in terms of the flexibilities, the ability to cap and trade, some of those allowances, what it would mean for the bottom line. And I take those concerns seriously. That's why I'm willing, in a way that does not undermine the destination, to consult on how this policy works alongside my colleague, the Secretary of State for Transport. Because whilst I feel the previous government's aspiration, I understand why they did this policy, I don't think they considered, when the decision was made, the kind of falling demand in Europe which we have seen. And I think we have to work pragmatically across all bits of government to make sure this policy is not having the kind of outcomes which I think many of us who are aware of how exactly this works do share.
Matt Weston.
Mr. Speaker, I refer members to my declaration of interest. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement. I'm greatly saddened by the decision, and may I suggest that plant rationalisation, platform rationalisation would have been a major factor. Let's be honest, the industry wanted certainty, but the challenge faced by automotive manufacturers in meeting the ZEV mandate, introduced by the last government, is more stringent than in Europe and most other markets. Put simply, consumer uncertainty was introduced by the last government. So I find the remarks of the Shadow Minister disingenuous. Can I urge the government to introduce more flexibility in the annual targets?
Disingenuous is aimed at a particular person. We don't do that. You've been here long enough, and I'm sure you want to withdraw it immediately.
I withdraw that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Can I urge the government to introduce more flexibility in the annual targets 24 to 29, introduce consumer incentives, and consider redirecting any penalties towards EV charging infrastructure and not to Chinese government car companies?
Tuesday.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend as well. I think he makes some very good points about the fact that whilst nearly every major market has policies of this kind, ours does operate in a different way, say to, for instance, how the French proceeded with theirs. I agree with him that the major failing of the former Prime Minister's speech was to keep this policy in place but change the destination, which really makes no coherence whatsoever. You should do one or the other logically. To do both undermines confidence and still doesn't give the kind of pragmatic flexibilities we're talking about today. And the specific things that he mentioned will all be part of the consultation my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, will lead on.
Sir Julian.
I assure the Secretary of State that the question I'm about to ask I would have put to a Conservative minister equally. And that is this: if all British car manufacturers came together and told the government that they could not possibly meet this 2030 goal, would the government nevertheless persevere in maintaining it as an immovable target?
Well, I would recognise the honourable gentleman's fairness and equity, whichever side of the House he's sitting on, and have no doubts about that. We do listen to industry. We have that very close relationship with them, and that is why we understand that the destination they want is 2030. The pressures of the system are in the next few years because of a situation which I don't believe, and I'm saying this in good faith to Conservative members, I don't believe government ministers at the time considered this set of European and global economic factors in terms of the particular decisions that they made. So that's why we've got to get this balance right. We should also recognise, given we are an export-led automotive producer, that if we weren't being ambitious about the transition, we'd lose our export markets because we wouldn't have anything to sell, because other countries have these policies, and that is where the consumer is going. It's about how we support the transition, and that's where we work so closely with industry.
Antonio Batts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I draw attention to the Register of Interest as a member of Unite the Union. Can I thank the Secretary of State for coming to the House today on such a difficult day for the car industry. All of our thoughts are with the workers in Luton today. I wanted to ask the Secretary of State to thank him for the work he's doing, engaging with the industry and with unions on a better way forward on electric vehicle targets. This news is really disappointing, but does the Secretary of State agree with me that we can and should be positive about the future of the automotive industry in this country? It matters to me locally as the MP for many, many businesses in the automotive supply chain, as I know it matters to many members across the House.
Secretary of State.
Thoroughly agree with the content and sentiment of my honourable friend's question. That support this government is committed to is about that transition, but we should be excited by what British manufacturers are doing. We should be excited by what JLR, what Nissan, what Toyota are doing. We should be excited, I mean, in the supercar, the luxury end of the market from McLaren and Rolls-Royce. I could mention all of our iconic brands. There's a lot of exciting things going on. And if honourable members aren't aware of that, these are all manufacturers more than happy to host members of Parliament coming to visit. So I would encourage people who aren't aware of the situation to do that. But they will explain the pressures they're under in the short term, and they will endorse the change of policy this government is putting forward today.
Vera Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.